2005, a small team of Special Forces commandos quietly moves down a dark alleyway in Baghdad, Iraq. Heavily armed with suppressed weapons and night vision, we quietly move through the shadows as we approach the expected enemy building. At this point of the war, Saddam has been captured and handed over to the Iraqi government. This removal of power brought in a new reign of terror as Zarqawi and his army of foreign fighters set up sleeper cells in resistance to U.S. military occupation. Through low-vis reconnaissance, intelligence led us to this al-Qaeda terrorist safe house. This network of terrorists has carried out multiple bombings, beheadings, and the cause of the rise in insurgency to U.S. troops. Under the cover of darkness, our team moves to contain and isolate the target building. Quietly setting up assault ladders, my teammates sweep and clear windows, doors, and alleyways with the IR lasers. An explosive breaching charge is quietly placed on the hinge side of the door, stacked at the breach. We waited for the command to execute. The command given by the assault commander, a command to initiate explosives placed on the breach point, followed by speed and death as we enter and kill our enemies. Suddenly, through my amplified headsets, I can hear a noise in the next room. The break in the radios confirmed bad house. Bad house, a command given through the radio to ready us for close quarters combat. Just a thin wall separating life and death, and the willingness to place it all on the line for a code and a belief. Tonight, as we sit here underneath the stars, heaven, I ask you, what do you live for? What is your purpose? Do you live for survival? Or can you look past this primitive instinct and strive for a life of meaning and purpose? In today's world, we get stuck on the aspect of surviving that we forget the joy of living, which is fulfillment. Let me explain. Majority of us here will live overall long lives with the ability to have long-lasting memories. These two abilities alone allow for more of a fulfilling life over any other animal species inhabiting this world. What I'm saying is God has given us the ability to become something more, to become something greater than our own environment. A choice. A choice to become greater in our own existence. So the question here tonight is, what do you live for? You live for survival or you live for purpose? Survival, an instinct developed over 200,000 years of human evolution. Instincts that kept our primitive ancestors alive as hunter-gatherers, handed down through generations of evolution. Instincts that kept even in today's domestic world, our primitive brains are programmed for survival. Always looking at the negative in the day and in others. A survivalist mind that seeks comfort over hardship. Survival in today's world is getting up early to go to a job we hate, working to do things that we dislike, just for external things. We look at promotions, bigger house, bigger car. Looking at that would lead us to happiness. Always looking at externals to affect how we feel inside. We choose to cause suffering in ourselves because we choose to become the product of our environment, living our lives one emotion to the next, never controlling the situation because we can't control our own selves. Always looking for the external conditions to influence how we act or feel. As a warrior, there's nothing more powerful to be stronger than the conditions, circumstances of life. To be stronger than the conditions that we are given. To endure the hardships for the bigger gain. To live for purpose rather than resistance. And this is only done by living a powerful why. Bushido, the way of the warrior. An ancient code of conduct emerged from war-stating periods of Japan. Bushido and the servant virtues of the code of samurai is deeply rooted in Confucianism. To live a life heavily grounded in ethics and morality. The seventh code that governs Bushido the Way: compassion, duty, honor, respect, loyalty, sincerity, courage. The courage to be stronger than the chaos of one's environment. For it is through chaos that one finds their higher why. You say, I was born in chaos. I was born on a cold cement floor in Saigon Hospital. My mother shielded my body from incoming artillery fire in my morning of my birth. At this stage of the war, American troops had left Vietnam, and I was born on the losing side of war. At 3 months old, I lost my countries and freedoms to the communist regime. We lived underneath communist occupation. My uncles that served alongside Americans were imprisoned in re-education camps. Anybody who was sick, fell ill, weak, were quietly brought out to the jungles and murdered. At 3 years old, my family and I, we escaped genocide on an overstuffed wooden fishing boat with hundreds of thousands of other refugees, the boat people. Later on, we were known as. It was estimated 400,000 plus people died at sea. And there we were, in the basement of a boat, escaping Vietnam on the hopes of freedom. It was such a lucrative business to forcibly stop the refugees, to board the boats, to kill the men, rape the women, and enslave the children. It was so easy. It brought in so many more bandits from surrounding countries, killing, murdering, taking. Somehow we escaped past the pirate tree, and we made our way into Malaysia, where the Malaysian Coast Guard stopped us at gunpoint. They boarded our boats, roped us, and pulled us back out to the South China Sea. Further and further we drifted. Finally, they pulled us out where they knew that we could not reach shore again. They cut the line, shot the boat, shot the motor, and left us there to die. My mother, she said we drifted for roughly 30 days. What turned into a 2-day trip from Vietnam to Malaysia. Now we're in a desperate survival situation. People were dying. The dead got pushed overseas. People were sick. We were dying of dehydration. It was common practice amongst fleeing refugees to carry poison within their belongings. The poison was to be administered to the children so we may not endure such a horrible death, so that we may not be enslaved by the pirates, so we won't starve and die at sea. But the thing is, my mother, she held on one more day. And as we were dying out at sea, she held out one more day in the hopes that we could make it out of here. And then we got caught up in a huge storm, a huge tropical storm. We were just a small little fishing boat. It was a miracle we didn't capsize. And somehow we drifted further out into hopelessness. And somehow, by the grace of God, our boat drifted into a pinpoint location, a lat long, where a Russian supply boat was exiting out of Vietnam. I tell you, the Russians, the same ideology, the communism that took us out of our country, murder us. They could have easily looked at us as an enemy. But this crew, they chose humanity, and they saved us. And they put us into Indonesia, where we lived in a refugee camps for roughly a year and a half. Later on in life, I asked my mother, I'm like, why, Mom? Why so long in a refugee camp? You know, people were dying, people were drugged out in the woods, raped, murdered. It was a desperate survival situation. For there, we lived a year and a half. And my mother said, you know, during the Vietnam War, there was an American Special Forces Green Beret officer. And his G base got overran by the communists, and he was stabbed in the ribs by a SKS bayonet. And he was extracted out from the G base and he was put into Saigon Hospital where my aunt would frequently visit and take care of him. My grandfather seen him in the hospital and he told my aunt that there's no way he's going to make it, he's going to die. He's a Green Beret. So he went back to the States and he married my aunt. And he sponsored the paperwork for us to get to the United States. My family and I started our lives in America with the hopes of freedom. We stayed with my aunt and uncle until we were able to get on our feet. My parents, they lost everything. And now we had to try to start again in a country that we couldn't speak the language and they didn't even accept how we looked. You see, the Vietnam War was an extremely unpopular war, and I was the face, and my family was the face of this unpopular war. My parents, eventually they moved out, and we lived in a very small apartment in a very poor part of town. One U-size mattress, one full U-size mattress is the only furniture that we could afford in our home. My whole family, my mother, father, brother, and myself, we slept on this mattress. We had no other furniture. The refugees would hand me down, third generations of hand-me-down clothes. Clothes with hose, shoes with hose on the bottom. Hose and shoes that my mother would stay up late at night and fix. So my brother and I, we can attend school. I'm telling you, going to school as a poor Vietnamese refugee was horrible. I got picked on often. My teachers, classmates, and their parents made sure that my kind wasn't welcome in their hometown. And I was reminded every day of how I didn't belong. My name was often replaced by racial degrading words, which was supported and reinforced by my peers' parents. You know, I would tell you, growing up, substitute teacher days was like the worst days for me. And let me explain. Substitute teacher days. My Vietnamese name is pronounced Tu Tung Lam, right? Imagine that. And this substitute teacher, this persistent substitute teacher, he came in and he tried to pronounce my native name. And of course, all the other students decided to laugh and make fun of me. And there was this bully, and he looked at every chance to remind me how poor I was and how I didn't belong. Well, on this substitute teacher day, the substitute teacher had enough as the class got rowdy, and I was told to go down to the principal's office with the bully. I didn't understand why I was being asked to go down there. I was being picked on. So I did. I walked down to the principal's office, and the principal told me and the bully to sit down and wait for our parents. Well, my mother, she don't have a car, and I knew I was going to be sitting here for a while. The bully's mother finally showed up and demanded to know what's going on. The principal stood up and he said, "Your son called that boy a chink." You know, I tell you, man, I was so defeated that day. I felt like I didn't belong. And the mother of the bully, she went and picked up her son, and she walked over to me and stood in front of me as I was sitting there, forcing me to look up at her. And she said something to me that, well, I'll never forget to this day. She said, "My son is right. Your kind don't belong here. And you need to go back home to your country." See, I didn't have a country. I didn't have a home. I didn't have a family in Vietnam. They were murdered. So my mother, she never came and picked me up, and I caught the school bus home. And that night, I didn't speak to my family members. And I sat in that quiet room in our used full-size mattress, and I sat there. My mother came in later on that night, and she must have sensed something was wrong. And she said to me, she says, "Son, we will all have our bad days. But what do you learn from these bad days? And who is the person that you will become from this bad day?" It was So defeated. But I knew at that age there was something stronger than hate, you know. I was born in war. I saw my family members killed in front of me, murdered. I knew that there was something stronger than this. I just didn't know what. And how could you? My parents, they divorced when I was 9 years old, and we moved in with my future stepfather. My future stepfather, he was a drill sergeant. He was a Special Forces Green Beret. We went from 0 discipline to 150 miles of discipline. So that means 4:30 in the morning, waking up to the Ballad of the Green Beret. I can still sing it in my mind. We saluted the American flag. It was raised, and we put our hands over our heart. We did physical training prior to going to school. It was a dress code. Academics, physical training, and many hours of chores. And I could tell you, man, at 9 years old, I really had a hard time. I really had a hard time with that level of discipline, you know? Let me tell you, I didn't hear from my father for roughly a year. You know, like any child at that age, you know, divorce is very hard. And I didn't hear from my father, and I was very lonely, and I was stuck in this lifestyle that I never asked for, to get up at 4:30 in the morning, run through the woods in North Carolina. Didn't ask for any of it. I was doing my academics, my homework, and my mother brought in a cardboard box. And she said to me, she said that this is from your father. And you know, I tell you, man, I didn't know how to take it because I didn't hear from my father for a year, and I was really hurt. So I put this cardboard box across from me, and I stared at it almost all evening as I was doing my homework. And finally, I had enough courage to finally open up this box. And within the contents of this box, there was 4 VHS tapes, dubbed VHS tapes, written in Vietnamese. I couldn't read Vietnamese at the time, so I randomly just put in a tape. It was the Art of Budo. It was Bushido. Budo, the combat side of being samurai. Iaido, the way of sword and mind. To live a life of purpose and meaning. And I tell you, man, I was so taken back by these tapes. You know, I was nobody at that time. I was being picked on. I was so weak. And I looked at these tapes. Life of purpose. The way. A warrior. And I tell you, I didn't know how to be this. I was so weak, you know. But I knew at that point that I wanted to be something more. And I continued to get picked on, you know, continue to get picked on in school. I tell you, I became really skilled at reconnaissance. I knew where the bullies were, I knew their schedule, and I created a pattern of life, and I avoided my bullies. But let me explain this. I was so defeated, right? And there was something that happened to me, 2 things that happened to me when I was 11 years old. My uncle, the Special Forces officer, picked me up, and he just wanted to spend uncle and nephew time. And my uncle must have sensed something was wrong with me. He must have sensed something wrong because he said something out of the blue. He said, too, as he was driving me to Dairy Queen, he said, too, there'll be days that people are going to flick you off. They're going to spit in your face, and they're going to say, you don't belong here, man. You need to ask yourself, you want to be a fucking commando today? The days that your bones ache, and you're holding this, you're carrying this load, and you feel like it's about to shatter underneath you. You need to ask yourself, do you want to be a fucking commando? The days that's cold, wet, and rainy, it's 4 o'clock in the morning, you're laying in your bed, and it's comfortable. And you know you need to get up, and you need to train your body because you're a weapon that America relies on. You need to ask yourself, do you want to be a fucking commando? I was 11. And I could tell you, commando. Wow. What a life of discipline. To be this force of power. Amazing. You know, later on that year, my mother, she would drive hours. Hours we would drive across town. Hours to deliver food to the needy, to the refugees. She would hand me down clothes and help. Hours we would drive. And then, you know, we were driving back, and I said, Mom, why? Why do you help them so much? They don't even appreciate you. She stopped the car. It got so real. And she asked me to look at her, and she reminded me of something that I kept to me to this day. She said, it doesn't matter the conditions or circumstances. If you can, you must help others. And in doing so, we create a better world. You see. From 9 to 11, I was indoctrinated into this special forces lifestyle. My stepfather was special forces, my uncle, all his teammates. I didn't have friends, so they became my friends. I knew the mission of the Green Berets, to free the oppressed, to free the enslaved, from oppressed man to free man. I knew at that age, if I could be this force, to go back and fight for the people that were my parents and myself, then that was the way. That was the way for me. I can tell you, growing up in Fayetteville was very hard. Fayetteville, North Carolina. More commandos there than all of the United States. I was often picked on and isolated for being different. I was laughed at, mocked for being poor, and I smelled indigenous. I would often retreat to the local library, where I seeked out the philosophies of Taoism. And the reason why is because the other 3 tapes were Bruce Lee tapes, right? And Bruce Lee had all these philosophies, and it turned me on to philosophies when I was very young. Taoism. To live in harmony with the universe. You know, Lao Tzu was a philosopher. He was the emperor's record keeper and a founder of Taoism. And Lao Tzu said, if you wish the world to be a better place, then it must start with you. I concluded my high school education with a thesis on the art of war by General Sanju. Graduated high school, enlisted in the Army. At that time, there was no direct entry into the Special Forces, so I became a paratrooper with the 82nd Airborne. Then I tried out and served a short time with the amphibious long-range reconnaissance teams before trying out with the Special Forces. At 21 years old, I was forward stationed in 1st Special Forces Group, Okinawa, Japan. I spent 2 decades traveling around the world, fighting and freeing the oppressed. From overt to covert missions, my teammates and I fought and hunted down some of the world's most wanted men. Men that kidnap women, children, and the profits of human trafficking. Dictators that seek to control, starve, and oppress their own people, fighting for the safety of our homeland. Looking back, I could tell you one thing I learned while serving with the Special Forces was my higher why. There was a popular song in the 70s, The Ballad of the Green Beret by Barry Sandler. 100 men would test today, 3 wins the Green Beret. The many hours of physical training carrying combat loads that would break the will of a human being. To move with speed and pinpoint accuracy, pushing through physical and mental exhaustion. To move with heavy weight for unknown distance, feeling your bones ache to the point where it's about to shatter. You better know your why. On the 18s, we were gone majority of the time to some of the most hostile areas in the world. To fight for the people, you must live with the people. And that doesn't come without a cost. Time with family, holidays, birth and deaths of loved ones. You're not around. You're not there. You're running with some rebel in some foreign country. You're training some militant group, working with some foreign commando, fighting to suppress conflicts in some of the most hostile areas in the world. You better know your why. My mother, what a beautiful, beautiful person. She gave me everything. She gave it all for us to have a chance at freedom. So it meant a lot to her that I graduate college, you know. So on my high school graduation day, I promised my mother that I would graduate college. I can tell you it was extremely hard to go to college on the Special Forces A-teams. We were always gone. I was that guy to carry a tough book, laptop in my rucksack, patrolling through the jungles of Zamboanga, Philippines, studying in a grass hut. During the war in Iraq, I was that guy who washed the blood from my hands and my body as my teammates slept. And I was that guy who logged on to the internet to take a final exam. I graduated with honors on top of my class while fighting counter-poaching wars in Bunmajida, Cameroon. I took my final exam on a Cameroon commando camp. It was extremely hard. It was extremely hard. But I tell you, the why for my mother was higher than myself. The Special Forces, a job where men die young. I was standing underneath a shaded oak tree in Montana when they lowered my teammate into his final resting place. Trying to grasp the emotions here, wishing my friend eternal peace. Through the distance, I can hear protesters wishing for more dead soldiers, praising for this day, laughing and mocking as I was trying to bury my friend. You better know your why. Hate. What a powerful imagery, right? Hate. Hate numbs you from fear. You know, I tell you, man, at one point in the war, I picked up the sword of hate. And I swung at our enemies as hard as I could. And every swing, that hate embodied me. That hate became me. For me, it was 15 years of combat, conflict, war. 23 years, service to a God and country. And I tell you, man, hate. It will blind you from the world. What a beautiful night, right? You'll never see it. You're never there. After my 20 years of service to God and country, I found myself in a dark place. I could tell you I really had a hard time when I retired from the military. Where do you go after you're free to oppress? Where do you go after you live a life of intensity? Where do you go? And I tell you, for me, it was depression. It was mistakes. It was the pain that I saw in the world replaying through my mind over and over. I was in a bad place and I was trapped. I want to put you on this bad day. You know, after my time in service, I laid in bed almost all day. And I said, man, I must be really tired from my time in service. It turned out to be depression. You know, my wife, beautiful person, she worked up in Denver, and she was this big-time manager at a big-time corporation, right? Big deal. And here I was, 23 years, retired commando, broken, lost. I had no energy. All I saw was darkness. So let me put you on my bad day. I was sitting there on this couch, watching a TV that was off. I wanted to give up on life. And I heard a voice Get up. So I did. I got up. And I walked around this dark house. And somehow I ended up in my library. My library has books, samurai books, all war books, 27 countries, things I collected all around the world. And I sat there and I opened up this bookcase and blindly I pulled a book. Without thought, I pulled this book. It was the Book of Five Rings by Miyamoto Musashi, a Ronin. Words written by a Ronin back in 1645 in a Buddhist cave, Redondo Cave, Kumamoto, Japan. Samurai, a warrior, a philosopher, a gardener. He was everything I wanted to be, and somehow I lost my way. And I realized that at that point. They said that rebirth is the renewal of one's mind. So I realized that at that point, and you know, I found that answer. I found that answer when I was 11 years old, when my uncle asked me, do I want to be a fucking commando today? I found that answer. So I got up and I fought back. And this time, the enemy was me. So I studied my enemy, just like I studied my enemies when I hunt them down and killed them overseas. I studied my enemy. I was that guy who was running on the treadmill at 5 o'clock in the morning, listening to some doctor talk about mind and body connection. I was that guy who sat there and reflected back on life and my mistakes. I embraced a new form of discipline, a discipline that is different from my strict upbringing. It was a discipline that was different from the A-team. This discipline was getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning and sitting with God in mindfulness. And as the sun comes up, I'm grateful for the day. And I promised myself that day that I will be the best person I can be for this day. And on my bad days, I take the deepest notes. You know, after my time in the Philippines, we lost some teammates in the Philippines, and after my time, we were prepping to go to Afghanistan. We moved into Jammu, Kashmir, which is the border of India, where we conducted mountain warfare training. 18,500 feet we trained with the Indian commandos. On the weekends, my teammates slept. For a young Bushi, a young samurai, I had to go visit the Tibetan monks. So I did. I grabbed the commando and I went and visited Tibetan monks. And I asked this Tibetan monk, why is the world so cruel? You know, oh, I was born in war. I saw the worst in humanity, lost teammates. Why is the world so cruel, monk? This monk smiled. And he took me out back at this temple and he took a stick and he drew a circle on the ground. And he took 2 sacks. And one sack had black rocks and one sack had white rocks. And he sat there and he said, for many years I sat here. And if I had a negative thought, I would cast a black rock. When I had a positive thought, I would cast a white rock. For many years, it was all black. And he said roughly about 4 years, he started casting his white stone. And now it's all white. And I said, wow, what changed, monk? What changed? Because you see, the world's so cruel because we are so unaware of our thoughts within the moments. And if we take inventory of our thoughts, will we not have more control over our emotions? If we have more control over our emotions, would the world not be a better place? You know, fast forward that, trying to find my peace. Instead of stones, I wrote down my thoughts. Within every moment, I wrote down my thoughts and I focused in on what is called meditation, mindfulness. Focusing in on the day, focusing in on the moment, to train your brain again. So I did. I wrote down my thoughts. So negative. So negative. You know, people ask me too, what is meditation, man? Would you just sit there and concentrate on breath? I ask you. You know, it was a commando. One of my friends asked me that. And I said, when we train to be a commando, do we not train and harness our body, our minds, to focus in on what is important, to ignore pain, to focus in on the weapon, on the situation? Do we not? That's what meditation does for you. It allows you to focus in what's important. So I did. And every day I worked on myself. And every day I failed. Every day I failed. I would come out of meditation worse than I would come in meditation. The noise was just too loud in my mind. Too loud. But I was on this journey for peace. And I tell you, man, on this journey, working on myself, I started seeing the beauty around me. My wife. You know, she became my light. My friends that I'm meeting along the way as a Ronin. And as I travel across the United States, I gave back. I went to the communities and I taught law enforcement officers, I taught the military, and I taught the law-abiding citizens so they can better protect themselves and their communities. And did this because I love my country. And my wife and I would continue to travel. And as I worked on myself, I continued to see the beauty in the world. Slowly. Taking one day at a time. And I tell you, man, the power of the universe, it rewards those who gives. And this is the thing is, when I was traveling around the United States, you know, we were filming and we started posting our training. And then the History Channel called us, right? And, and I appeared in 3 seasons of Forged in Fire, Knife or Death, working with Bill Goldberg. And the thing is this, we continue to travel, my wife continued to travel, and continue to give. And then Infinity Ward calls us. Say, too, can you come to Hollywood? Can we capture your martial art movements? So we did. And here I am on a video game. And I tell you, man, it's such a huge honor. Not just because of video game, but it's such a huge honor because now I can help others. Right? Because I'm a Call of Duty character, I can speak to those. I can speak to the youth. I can help. And I'll tell you now, we're the face of Springfield Armory as we work with them developing guns, weapons, as we go around and teach and develop our communities and Americans. I continue to give back every single day, and I still have my bad days. But I work every single day to be a better person, focusing on what's important. And what's important is the things that are inside your control. Do not focus on the things that are outside. And I tell you, man, I'm so grateful for the opportunities I'm given. I'm so thankful. As a child born in war that slept with rats in refugee camps, that came from absolutely nothing, no country, escaping war, genocide, racism, loss. As I look back, I'm thankful. I'm thankful for the journey, and I'm thankful for the struggles. Bruce Lee once said, do not pray for an easy life. Pray for the strength to endure a difficult one. We have one life, it's important to live it with purpose. A purpose so strong that it supersedes your own existence. To live by a code of ethics and morals. My uncle, the Special Forces officer, asked me once, as I was sitting in Dairy Queen, 11 years old, he asked me, too, what's a champion? You know, at that point, I was spit on, flicked off, ridiculed. The holes in my clothes was ripped. I was reminded every day of how weak insignificant my race is. As my uncle asked me what a champion was, I reached out to something I wasn't. I said, Uncle, a champion's a winner. My uncle reminded me that day that a loser can continue to keep on going if he continues to win. A champion is a person that gets spit on, pushed down, told they don't belong here, but yet they rise. A champion is a person that keeps a promise to the one that means the most to them. A champion doesn't allow the conditions and circumstances to influence the person they wish to be. They influence the person they wish to be by the actions they take every single day. A champion lives and dies by a code in a higher why. In life, we need to seek to be a champion. Remember this. One moment can change the day. And one day can change the life. God and country.
Yeah, baby.
All right.